Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give it about 1 more minute for everyone else to join in. I know we have people joining in at different times of the presentation, but want to be respectful of your time too. So we'll give it just 1 more minute, and then we'll begin this webinar. All right? Can you just let us know if you're able to hear us correctly? You're able to hear us well? You can just type on the chat. There's a little chat icon. Just let us know if you can hear us well. Nope, we have more people joining. Perfect. Thank you so much. Excellent. All right. I know we have more people joining shortly, but we want to be respectful of your time. So thank you again for joining this ClinBiz webinar that's done in collaboration with Strategicon Pharma, who's our sponsor for this webinar presentation, and also Leif Kuse, who's going to be our presenter on this awesome topic of strategies to accelerate and optimize your biotech's financing. So a very important topic for a lot of us. And so we want to make sure we get started on this conversation. But just before we go on to this webinar, just want to remind you of a few just housekeeping items. As we mentioned, you can post anything you want to tell us through the chat function. So you can just simply type in if you have questions throughout the presentation. We will have a Q&A time at the end, but if you'd like to just post your questions so you don't forget it, just go ahead and include it right there on the chat, and we'll be able to address it during Q&A time, or the speaker may also be able to address it throughout the presentation. If there are any audio issues, any issues from your end, simply refresh your browser. That usually will correct any issues. Try not to exit out of the presentation because you may have issues coming back in. Okay. And lastly, just want you to know that within the files icon, you'll see a little orange button there highlighted. It just means we have a few extra resources, videos, things that you may want to take a look on this topic that may be interesting for you. Okay, so without further delay, I'd like to introduce to you our speaker for today. And by the way, first of all, I just want to also thank, and I mentioned that initially, but I want to thank Strategicon Pharma for sponsoring this conversation, a very timely conversation for us. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker for today. He's Leif Kuse, and Leif is co-founder and CEO of Pharall, the world's first group purchasing organization for clinical trial services. Leif has 2 decades of business experience in the field of clinical outsourcing, including vendor management, budgeting, and project controlling for biotech companies, CROs, and the pharmaceutical industry. He has successfully implemented diverse governance models for big pharma companies and managed numerous partnerships between CROs and pharma companies. He's a former head of purchasing at Fresenius Biotech in Germany. Leif has also held investment management positions at different venture capital funds after finishing his academic studies in business administration and law. And so with that, I'd like to pass it over to you, Leif, for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you very much for having me, and welcome everyone to this presentation. I'm really excited to share a little bit of the strategies that I've come through my my business experience in helping biotech companies leveraging their biotech financing through outsourcing strategies. And this is what this presentation is about. So just a little bit background on myself. I'm outsourcing consultant by heart. So I really help biotech companies in outsourcing their clinical trials over the last years. And we have formed Pharall, which is a pharmaceutical research alliance, which is in fact a group purchasing organization to help biotech companies in getting their finances quicker and easier. So we are specialized on preclinical and clinical stage biotech companies. And what we are doing is we are combining the purchasing power of small and mid-sized enterprises by solving that R&D outsourcing problems of the SMEs. And one of the problems that we are always trying to solve is to leverage the biotech financing by innovative outsourcing strategies. So this is, of course, always key, because we always in biotech have to answer the question, where do we get the money from for all the R&D projects that we are running? So if we have a quick look of what kind of financing opportunities we have, there are different categories that you perfectly know, which is the ones that is dilutive financing, which means financing your company and your projects by private equity or venture capital or services for equity. The other option is to do this on a non-dilutive financing way with, of course, venture debts or bank loans. So there you do not dilute your own shares of your company. There's also other opportunities like dormant equity holdings, out-licensing to industry partners, and royalty financing. So these are all the options that you have if you do not want to dilute your own shares. And then there's a third category, which everyone knows as well, which are the free non-dilutive financing opportunities. Free means that does not cost you any shares. And one of those that you perfectly know are research grants from foundations. That is very much straightforward. What the other option that has been mainly overlooked is also really at the beginning of biotech companies, is the reduction of your capital needs, especially by cost savings. And I would like to show you some strategies how you really can focus on that aspect to have and to free additional financing leeways in your finances without diluting your own shares.
Leif, I'm going to run a poll just to ask some of our attendees. So you're going to see a poll come on your screen. So love to have your input. How satisfied are you about your clinical trial cost reduction strategies? First choice, very satisfied, sort of satisfied, could be improved. Not satisfied, we have no structured cost reduction process. So if you can go ahead, and I'll give it a few seconds, if you can give your input on this poll question, and then we'll see some of the results that we come up with. We'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, thank you. All right, 10 more seconds, and then we'll wrap it up. Sometimes it comes in through after, but let's go ahead and 5 seconds, and let's end the poll and publish the results. Okay, we have mostly very satisfied as the response, Leif. So I turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. So let's have a quick look at this chart. And on this chart, I would like to show you a little bit on what I mean by freeing up your financial leeway. If you look on the left side, we see the budget of your project, which might consist of let's say 3 different categories that we see here on the left side with the 3 different blue colors. And you can close the financing gap of the whole budget of something around 8.5 million euros by capital coming from investor A, investor B, but there's no investor C. So you have this red gap here, which you need to close before you can really start off your next project. So what you can do is to reduce your budget by cost reduction opportunities that you can use. And when you reduce your cost reduction, so you reduce your budget, it might lead to the situation B on the right side, which means that now not only investor A and investor B pop up to finance your project, but there might be another investor C who was not able to close the whole gap that we have seen on the left side, but who has, enough financial capacities to close this narrow gap that we have now here in situation B. So what I would like to show you here is, with cost reductions before or during your financing round, you might be able and get to situation B, which means you can start off your project easier, quicker, and with less capital needs, meaning with less dilution of your shares. So let's see what strategies we have there now to reduce the budget, and what are the strategies, especially in clinical and preclinical development, that we could use. One of those strategies that we use at Pharall is group buying. Group buying means that we use the collective buying power of many to reduce the price that you need for your projects. So in essence, that would mean if we do not only purchase one trial, but maybe purchase or outsource 2 or 3 trials in one go, we might get better prices and also get better services from our vendors. So that's what we're doing here. So we are combining the purchasing power of many. The question is, can we do this? And the answer is yes, we can do this, although all those projects are very much different. And the reason why is that in the end, it really boils down to purchasing power, meaning volume. And with bigger volume, you get better discounts from your CROs. So this is an option. The other option that there is, and this is a very straightforward one, is negotiation. So if you negotiate, if you do a very good negotiation during your outsourcing process, you can really reduce your capital needs by something around 20%. So this is what we did here in a case study with an oncology phase 1 trial, where we just looked at the CRO fees, which we reduced by around 20%. And we have not looked there at the investigator fees and third-party vendor costs. But this will there are some other options there as well, which we look at in the next slides as well. This cost reduction opportunity also, of course, works in preclinics. So this is just an example how we could use this in group purchasing with small biotech companies. You can increase your discount that you're getting from your vendors from around 4%. That is the usual discount that you're getting, up to 16%, depending on the overall volume that you're purchasing. So these are now already 2 strategies. There is a third one, and the third strategy to reduce your capital needs is by asking the question, do we really need all that money? Meaning, are we really sure about what our budget is? And one way to do that, or 2 ways to do that, to be sure what your budget is, to ask CROs, so to do a query at CROs and ask them, what is your average price per patient in the different indications? The problem there is that, as you can see here in this case, in this case study that we've done here, that the variance between the CROs 1 to CRO 6 can be very big, depending on indication 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So the variation there is very big. So you need really good expertise in the indication, and you need to know your vendors very well to really understand what of those answers that you're getting really leads you to a very reliable budget. So that's where it's also another option to have a better understanding of your capital needs in your clinical trials when you're using medical informatics. So this is another.
Leif, would you like to run a poll at this point?
Sure.
The second one? All right. So we'll just bring up a poll on your screen, which you'll see coming up. shortly. And that question would be, how difficult is it to compare apples to apples of CRO bids? So what has been your experience in terms of comparing apples to apples of CRO bids? First choice, very difficult, 3 or more weeks to compare. Difficult, around 2 weeks to compare, or not difficult at all, 1 to 2 weeks to compare. So go ahead and within the poll, let us know what your experience has been to compare CRO bids. And we'll just give it a few seconds so everyone can get on. All right. So far, the answer seems to be 100% very difficult. So 3 or more weeks. So we will end the poll here.
Interesting.
And yep, very difficult. That's been the feedback. So thank you so much. Sorry about that, Leif.
No worries, no worries. I mean, this is exactly what we are tackling here with this strategy when we query the budgets from the CROs. But as I said, the difficulty here is it's a cheap way to do that. It's a cheap and fast way. However, the accuracy is very low compared to if you do it with software. So this is the other option that you have. If you use medical informatics software, that's then what you can do to have a more accurate and more detailed budget of your expected clinical trial. So we have here 3 solutions on this slide. Solution C, meaning we're doing a ballpark query from the CROs, which gives you a lower accuracy compared to the other options, which is above 50%, I would say, but because of the spread, but it just takes 1 week to do that. Solution B and A are solutions where we're using some software. So in solution B, we are asking some key opinion leaders and interview them what the clinical trial would look like, and take those key figures and put them into the software. For example, you can use Clinical Master Portfolio, which is a very great tool because it gives you some answers on what the overall costs are, but you can also boil down and get some details if you really would like to understand what how this budget is built up. So if you have some detailed questions, and you can investigate this there. And solution A then is a solution with 2 software solutions, which is calculation software for clinical trials like Portfolio, and another software that you could use to get an understanding of in which countries, for example, you get the best results in patient recruitment, where it makes sense to go in which countries in those indications, and what the usual protocols are that you have, how they look like in the different indications. So if you can combine 2 software solutions there, the accuracy is much higher. It takes much time, of course, but in the end, the accuracy is much higher. So that was strategy 3. Strategy 4, which I would like to show you, is asking the questions, do we really need to do all that? So what I mean by that is, do we really need to do all that in our, for example, clinical trial? And what I would like to highlight here is another step that you could do at a very early stage, and that means protocol optimization. So why is protocol optimization so successful? It is because there was a study of the Tufts University here, and the result was that, as you can see here, that 25% of clinical study budget is devoted to collecting non-core data. Non-core data meaning data that is non-core, which means it does not support your first or secondary endpoints of your clinical trial. So that would mean that 25% of the budget is allocated to something that might be interesting from an exploratory perspective, but is not necessary for your next decision point, for your next point to really get to the point where you say, okay, this clinical trial has been a success. You might be able to reconsider portions of these 25%, budget allocated to maybe optimize your protocol in a way that you reduce your overall capital needs and get your financing rounds closed quicker. So just to make this a little bit more prominent, I just want to show you a few, in the next 2 slides, a few more results of this survey, of this study. And it was really interesting because what they found out was that most non-core data are source data verified. So that means that the non-core data that you're collecting, which is not supporting your primary or secondary endpoints, is source data verified. So monitors are flying out there, collecting this data and checking the data with the original source. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of money in clinical trials, because monitoring is one of the biggest buckets in your clinical trial budget. The other thing that they revealed was that 21% of the procedures in phase 2 protocols and nearly 30% of those procedures in phase 3 protocols collected data that are non-core, meaning that the collected data does not support your primary and secondary endpoints. So why is that important? It is important because your procedures are allocating to the costs in the third-party vendor costs and in your investigative fees. And this is another very big bucket in your clinical trials. So if you devote 20 to 30% of the procedures to that, you can memorize that there is a big 2-figure budget item that you can also investigate if there are some cost reduction opportunities in your protocol there. So there's another strategy, and this is, I would say, strategy 5. And so, this is strategy 5. And strategy 5 is something that is also interesting, and that means save time. Save time of your RFP process, save time of your budgeting process with an accelerated RFP process. Accelerated RFP process means that you're using experts who can guide you through an RFP process, which is straightforward, easy to use, and you have the experts in place that help you to guide through this process so that nothing is missing in the end when you're going to award. But on the other side, it does not take all the time that usually is needed. So we're able to reduce the outsourcing process from 3 months to 1.5, which is very straightforward. And we're doing this also by using software. So Clinical Master has here a very nice software, which is Source, which gives you the opportunity to collect the budgets from the CROs in one software, and really then can compare apples with apples and really can investigate and where the differences in the budgets. And as you know, time is money. So the quicker, the easier you have done your RFP process, brings you also quicker into clinic, and time is money. So this is another option, strategy 5, save time with an accelerated process. So in summary, and this is what I would like to show you and hope to show you in this presentation, is that we have something around 5 strategies. I've shown you 5 strategies that you can use in your process in reducing the capital needs. Start the outsourcing process early on before closing your financing round. This is my advice to you. The earlier you start with the budgeting and outsourcing process, the earlier you really know what your capital needs are, and then you really know what your financing needs are. Maybe you can close your financing rounds easier and quicker. Use the relevant experts like regulatory experts to optimize your clinical trials, and use software to do it. And if you do all that, you can reduce the capital need to close your financing rounds. You can reduce the time to close your financing round. You can reduce your equity dilution, which is important for you as well. And you can reduce the timeline from financing closed to project start, because you have already outsourced your trial. You already know your vendor, so you can just click on the button start and start off your project. I hope this was this was a little bit an eye opener for you for this topic, and I'm really keen to have some questions. So maybe let's open up for some questions around the topic, and yeah, go ahead, Deborah.
Thank you, Leif, so much for that very insightful presentation. We do have a few questions come in, so I'd just like to let everyone know that also we have online with us here Farah Ahmed from Clinical Maestro, which was the platform that Leif mentioned in terms of the technology tool they used to do this. So if there's any technology related questions, Farah will also be able to answer. So a question we've had come through the chat also is, one of the questions is, could you please repeat what portfolio tool is very effective, Leif?
Portfolio tool. So you mean the tool from Clinical Maestro that is portfolio, and portfolio that you can use in two ways. Portfolio we can use in one way in saying, okay, we have an understanding of what our clinical trial would look like, but we really would like to calculate what the budget is so that we know how much capital we need. The other option is that you use portfolio in the protocol optimization process, so you can calculate different scenarios and have a better understanding of, okay, if we're more going into indication 1 or indication 2, that costs us, more or less of money, or if we tweak around the protocol details, we also have a little bit more understanding of what is the overall budgetary impact of reducing or eliminating some of the protocol items.
Okay, perfect.
Is that correct, Farah?
Yes, absolutely. We even see that some of our customers are using it to evaluate certain procedures that could be occurring kind of at the site level or at the patient level, which seem, very interesting from an exploratory standpoint. But perhaps when you kind of, multiply that by the length of the study and the number of patients and the number of visits, it really is, quite a hefty investment, and so enables those organizations to actually, rationalize what services or what kind of additional tests would be really valuable to support the clinical endpoint. So it is kind of a clinical ROI tool as well.
Yeah, and Farah, don't forget about the countries. Don't forget about the countries. So if you have the opportunity also to use it to tweak around, okay, are we more going into Asia or more into North America? That might be one option. What is the difference to going to Europe? So yeah,
that's right.
That might be very interesting on the budget perspective.
Excellent. Thank you. And I hope that answers your question on the chat. If not, then just feel free to submit an additional question there. We also had another question come through. So which would you recommend for a small biotech, a full service CRO or an FSP model?
That is a very good question. And honestly, I cannot tell you what is the right answer here. There are advantages and disadvantages for both models. Of course, it is appealing on one side to have a full service CRO. So if you're really on a very early stage and this is your very first in human trial, it's a very good idea to go with for a full service CRO, especially if you're very much sure about that this CRO is a turnkey CRO, which means you just give them the project and they come back with a completed trial. However, if you are using the functional service provider model, it has some advantages if you're already experienced in clinical trials, because it is more cost effective. It is more cost effective in the sense that many of those projects you're leading by yourself, but then you need all the resources and the knowledge in-house for really leading this project. So it doesn't, it's you cannot say the one or the other side. It really depends on the organization and how mature your organization is. And when you know about that, then you can really decide which model is good for you.
That's right. I may also add that I think the FSP model certainly is beneficial if you're looking to, to have consistency in terms of the execution, let's say across, a portfolio of studies. Oftentimes we see that kind of in monitoring or in kind of the data sciences area where organizations want these services to be provided perhaps in their own system. So if you think of maybe an EDC, you want kind of the consistency of the same EDC being used over and over. And those are, some of the reasons why those FSP models are strongly considered for the objective of consistency across a number of studies.
Yeah, that's a very good aspect. And for if I may say and add to that, just to underline what you said, if you're really considering an FSP model, it might be good to go at first with the low-hanging fruits and maybe
That's
just carve out one of those aspects, as you said, like data management, biostatistics, statistics, or monitoring. And when you've done that, then move on to the other aspects.
That's right. And we recently actually have added an FSP bid grid into Clinical Maestro. So that's a new thing. Leif, maybe you haven't seen that yet. But that's also to support, the proportion of the industry, which is probably considerable, that is using FSP models as an outsourcing tactic in some shape or form.
Very good.
That's a great point about FSP model. And I think one that there's not a lot out there to compare. So that's a great point. Another question we've had come through is due diligence for either investors or potential acquisitioners is incredibly intensive and time sensitive. How long does it take to negotiate the contracts, and on what do you base the negotiation?
So is this referred, if I understand this is referred to the negotiation of the contracts of the clinical trials? We don't know.
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. So let's assume this is the question. It really depends on what you're doing and how you're doing the process. But honestly, it is done very quickly. I would say in 2 to 3 weeks, when you've really chosen your CRO, when you're clear about who your vendor is, then it's really a straightforward process. And I would advise to do it in a twofold process. In the one-fold process, meaning that you really sit together with your clinical team and with a provider and really differentiate and make a really expedited discussion about who is taking over what responsibilities and what is behind the line items, really, so that there's no gap in the end. And on the other side, then you go just into the final negotiation, which is just the financial negotiations. But honestly, this takes 2 to 3 weeks, and then you're done. Farah, is there anything that you would like to add?
No, that's certainly, I think the advantage of using some of the technology platforms out there is to really truncate the overall process and particular steps in that process. So I think we had seen the Apple to Apple comparison challenge. It often takes upwards of 3 weeks. I would assume that would really differ depending on whether there is kind of a standardized grid being provided or not. If you kind of contrast that with the application of technology, such as Clinical Maestro, you really are doing those comparisons in a click. So the technology does provide you kind of with digested information that allows you to just bunny hop over those manipulations and get right to the crux of the analysis and the diligence. We've also heard from our user base that these kind of analyses in preparation, let's say for a bid defense, really helps the selection team to be aligned and more prepared to ask the right questions and to challenge, in kind of an effective manner in the bid defense. So one would kind of assume that all of those pieces put together is what's creating those efficiencies. So in combination with guidance and the right tactics and strategies, as Leif has presented today, technology can play a strong role in actually truncating your process by 80% plus, aligning your team and kind of the selection team across the choices they have to make or the scoring, and in addition, just ensuring that you are making the right choice, which at the end of the day is very important, because outsourcing is a discrete event. But running the trial is kind of a long investment, right? It could take many years. So you definitely want to make the right choice and the right selection, and do so using all the tools that are available in the market today.
Perfect. We've had one more question come through. As far as I know, portfolio management is coordinated planning of interdependent projects. How is this function implemented in Clinical Maestro?
Yes. So thank you, Vlad, for the question. So definitely we do have a aggregation view where you're able to actually leverage the planning of multiple different programs and multiple different studies within those programs, and kind of have automated reports that put all of those programs together, so that you can actually visualize the activity and the challenges that you're having, at a portfolio level. So you're correct that there is a lot of interdependencies between different projects. There is the possibility in Clinical Maestro to compare across different bids, across different vendors. Historically, you can kind of look at maybe not just within one particular RFP, comparing vendors and comparing to, let's say, industry benchmark, but you can also do that in a historical fashion, where you can compare, okay, what did CRO 1 bid on this study, that they submitted last year? Maybe it's in the same therapy area or slightly different design. You could also look between vendors over time. So the idea of technology is really to put the format of the data in a sense, or in a way that you can actually compare, contrast, and mine over time. And that's really the advantage that we're kind of talking about. So a lot of the achievements or the opportunities that Leif has outlined today is possible to do with manual methods, such as Excel. What we're discussing is kind of the time that it takes to actually do that, and would your time be kind of better served just focusing on analysis and execution. So this is why we kind of call Clinical Maestro, and I'm sure other technologies that might be available, kind of a next generation Excel, meaning that it's producing all the exciting analysis outputs that would drive intelligence-based decision making, but without all of that time and manipulation and struggle with the format of Excel and other tools in being static, depending on formulas, and really kind of being constrained by the scale of complexity in a typical clinical trial.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pharall. Thank you so much, Leif. I believe those are the questions that came through. I just want to let everyone know on the call, some people were not able to join live, or perhaps you want to go back at a certain point. What we'll actually have is Leif and Pharall will reach out to you all, and those that weren't able to join all the way, and provide you the recording of this webinar, so that you can refer back if there are any points you'd like to refer back to or questions. And that way you'll also have the contact information for both Leif directly and Pharall for any other questions. Once again, I'd like to thank Strategicom Pharma for sponsoring this conversation. Thank you, Leif, so much for this wonderful presentation, and Pharall as well for answering all the amazing questions. And thank you all for joining us. And I hope to have you guys all with us next time.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.
Best of luck with your financing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye.